Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we are talking about the orc mid-game heroes. That's Gore Guts, Waze Makkah, and the Mega Knobs. Let's talk through these guys and see if we can do them some justice. So first up is Gore Guts. If any of you have played the campaign, you're probably very familiar with Gore Guts, but let's talk through them anyways. Gore Guts is actually a fairly decent hero, especially in the early to mid-game. Gore Guts doesn't have a lot of DPS. That is one of his downsides. He's essentially a tank and disruption hero, which is often good for heroes. Heroes do that fairly well, especially in the early game when there's not too many units out there shooting them. But what does Gore Guts do? Gore Guts does 26 true damage in melee. It's interesting that it is true damage, so he does do decent damage to buildings, I suppose, but 26 is quite a low number. So his damage is not reduced, but he's not doing a lot of it. Gore Guts has two primary abilities, the first of which is Spinning Claw, which is an activated and channeled ability, but you can move around in it. While you're moving around in it, he spins his claw and projectiles don't do any damage to him or stuff behind him. So basically they run into the spinning claw and they don't pass through him, they don't do damage to him, they don't pass through him. So you can use him to advance into heavy fire with that and keep your units behind him. It does do damage over time, although the damage over time is fairly low, and it slows in a circle, but it also slows him a little bit when he's using it. He's not as fast with his when he's spinning that claw as he is otherwise. And he can't melee attack while it's active, so he's not doing his normal punching attack. If you choose to let that, while the claw is spinning, if you choose to activate W again, you can target a location, and he'll throw his spinning claw at that location. It will stop him from spinning, but it will slam the claw into the position, which taunts, does damage, and knockbacks towards the target position in a circle. So it's a fairly decent AoE too. It's bigger than the grenade, like 2 or 3 times bigger than a grenade. So that's what he does with his claw. He also has Grappling Claw, which is a movement effect. It lets him throw his claw and jump to the target location. It causes damage and taunts in a circle, so oftentimes you throw this at a melee squad and Gore Guts pulls himself over there, and the squad is temporarily forced to fight him, and it's okay. It's an okay ability. It's up pretty often, so it makes him a little bit more mobile than he'd be otherwise, and that's that. If you have looted scrap on him, and then you use the spin, if you finish the full spin, then you get increased speed, damage, and heals in a circle after getting the full spin, which is interesting. And he's got 5k health, I believe, right? Yes, 5k health. So he's pretty tanky. He's a lot of health. One way to absorb damage. The thing is, his spinning claw often gets canceled. I believe grenades cancel it, but any knockback effect cancels it, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't stop grenades. I'm pretty sure grenades stop that. Certainly Assault Marine jumps stop that. And players are pretty good these days about disrupting that when it happens, because they don't want you to get your free ability at the end, and they don't want you absorbing tons and tons of damage. What does he have? He has Dirty Fighting, crushes opponents with a claw, causes damage and reduces damage output in a circle. Is this triggered on a critical? And he has critical damage in a line, so it looks like there are some damage enhancing abilities. If he gets to auto attack a lot, that's good. Explains why he feels like he does more than 26 true damage, so that explains what these are going on. Damage and reduces damage output in a circle, so it's like a point blank damage debuff to enemies fighting him in melee. He's a good disruption hero. He does what he's supposed to be doing as disruption, but he doesn't have range damage, and he doesn't scale all that well in the mid and late game. Gore Guts presence, and he costs 4. That is something else to consider. 4 is quite late for the first elite, so he's probably your second elite. So he's probably after Weird Boy, which means you've now spent 7 elite points already to get Gore Guts out at quite a late time in the game. May not be all that useful. When Gore Guts is deployed, a successful Wah heals in addition to its usual effects. I don't find that ability very useful at all, unless you are defending with the Wah, which does happen. You do use Wahs on defense, although oftentimes if you do that, the opponent just focuses your Wah banner and kills it instantly. So a lot of times when you are using Wah banners, it's on offense to charge up before attacking someone, in which case you're probably at full health anyways, but it's not a useless ability. That's okay. And the other one is Gore Guts command Keep Trucking, which is very, very, very good. But this can be separated from him. Once you get Gore Guts to 8, which will happen if you play the campaign pretty much at all, when he is 8, you are able to eject, or when you get him to 8, you can have this as a doctrine. But if you have this doctrine on him, or if you have it separately as just an army doctrine, units ejected from the truck gain a temporary shield and taunt in a circle, which is amazing because trucks are just amazing, and ejecting units is amazing, and giving them shield when you eject them directly into the enemy is an awesome idea, especially with taunt. So you load up on boys, you launch the boys land, the boys have a shield, the enemies are forced to attack them, they don't want to attack them, they don't even pop the shield, the boys don't take any damage. It's a really, really good ability. worth thinking about. This little mini wah, when he gets his spin off, almost never happens. When it does happen, yeah, okay, increased speed and damage for him is okay. I don't know how much of a damage increase with him it is, but it's never been that big of a deal that I've seen. But certainly if you do run towards someone, you could, I suppose, spin in the fog for a little bit, then come out of the fog of war as you're approaching and finish your spin and get that speed boost and damage boost at the start of a fight. That might be useful. But as a whole, he's mediocre, right? He's not bad, he's not great, but he's sometimes nice, but he's a little bit slow to deploy at 4. If he was like a 3-cost hero, I would probably strongly recommend him. He's just a little bit hard to get going in the early game because it's a little bit late, and in the mid game his abilities aren't quite as good because his abilities are very good versus the early infantry units, but not so good versus some of the units a little bit later. Okay, so that's Gore Guts. Let's take a look at the Waze Makkah. Big Mech Waze Makkah. This is arguably the worst hero in the game. There might be others, but I'm trying to think. Maybe I think this might be single-handedly the worst hero in the game. Okay, so what does he do? Well, he does some damage, I guess. He has 40 melee damage, 40 normal melee damage, or 27 ranged true damage. He has 3,400 health, which isn't a ton, but it's not super low. He costs 4 elite points, which is, again, an awkward number because it either means you're deploying at 7, 6, or 7, or you're waiting till 4, both of which mean he either he's a 4-point hero that's deployed in the mid game, which isn't all that strong, or he is a 4-point hero that's deployed very late in the early game, which means you got screwed in the early game. He has a couple abilities. Tractor Beam is probably his best ability in my opinion. It applies, you put it on a target. If it's a friendly target, it gains a shield. If it's a hostile target, it damages it and slows it, and it's quite a big slow. And you can toggle it again to yank the target back to you. So if an enemy hero is trying to run away and you slow it and it's running away, and then you can just pull it towards you, which is pretty good. And if you target scrap, the Waze Makkah can jump to the scrap location. It isn't very helpful, honestly, targeting scrap and jumping around. That's not a very useful portion of the ability, but the Tractor Beam's decent. Orbital Scrap. He targets a position, calls in junk from orbit, generating scrap, causing damage in a circle. It's true damage, but it's a very small amount of true damage, and it comes with a delay. So you target a location, and then like a second or 3 seconds later, it drops a small piece of scrap. The AoE is probably half the AoE of a grenade, so it's a very small location. It's literally just the size of a small scrap, and it doesn't do a lot of damage at all. This ability is weak. Scrap turrets, it's terrible. Activated and channeled. It sounds like it might be good, except A, it's channeled, and B, the damage on the scrap turrets is really weak. So he basically floats in the air, like those little connecting lines come out of him as he targets each of the scrap around him, and the scrap starts shooting people, and it shoots them for weak DPS that doesn't seem to scale at all across the course of the game, and he's channeled, so anything that disrupts his channel is going to disrupt those scrap turrets, and it's just bad. It's just bad all around. And while he's channeling, he can't use his attacks. It's just, this is a terrible ability. If he loots stuff, it just gets more orbital scrap charges, which isn't that good either. So all around his abilities, he's like a weak damage dealer with terrible abilities. His one redeeming feature is his snare. His doctrines really are quite bad too. When the Waze Makkah is deployed, Rex left by your units are temporarily upgraded into scrap turrets that automatically engage turrets. Maybe that could be okay. The scrap turrets seem very weak, so I guess if you're losing a lot of vehicles in an area where you're going to be fighting for extended periods of time, and your enemy is using a lot of low hit point infantry that can't run away and are already wounded and are tired, and he doesn't know what a turret is because he's never seen you use the Waze Makkah because no one ever uses Waze Makkah, and I don't know. You get the point. It's very difficult to find situations in when these are useful abilities. His scrap sight. Destroyed structures, vehicles, and squads temporarily provide vision in a circle around their location. I've not used this. It sounds neat. I don't know how actually useful it would be, but having sight is really good in this game. It lets you target all sorts of area of effect abilities, including artillery strikes, including all your hero abilities, that type of thing. So it might be nice to have that. This is a doctrine that you can get if you level him to 8. You don't ever have to use him again to get this doctrine. It might be interesting. I'd like to play around with it. Maybe we could find some stuff to do with sneaky shit. Maybe like, for example, getting scrap around this stuff and then using the commando to blow that shit up might be fun. But I have a feeling that I would use this without using Waze Makkah. In fact, I might get Waze Makkah to level 8 just so I can use this and try to combo with the Commando and see if it'd be any good. But my suspicion is it won't be that good. The Waze Makkah is probably the worst hero in the game. All right, let's talk about the Mega Knobs. Thankfully, I can say something positive about a hero. I guess I said fairly positive things about Gore Guts, but the Mega Knobs are great. They're a really great unit, in fact. Mega Knobs are a 6-point elite, which is nice. It's not a 7. It's a mid-game hero. This is probably something that is often worth deploying after you deploy a 2 or 3 point. This is worth getting that mid-game spike. He's got 2 really good abilities, and he does good damage. So the Mega Knob has 120 armor-piercing melee damage and 52 normal range damage. I think his default stance is ranged. You can always change the default stance on a hero by just toggling F. It will switch them to ranged or melee. You need to pay attention to that with the Mega Knobs. The downside of the Mega Knobs are they're really fucking slow. They're very slow to get into combat. They're a little bit reminiscent of Assault Terminators on the Marines, but they can't teleport. But they have 2 really good things to make up for that. The first of these is Electric Wall, which is great. It's on a pretty short cooldown. You fire a weapon at well, we'll show you. You can fire it at a location. Oh, it gets a little bit blocked. So he fires the thing at a location and it spits out this wall. It basically auto decides where it wants that wall based on the location that you fire it in your position. But you can use it to block enemies. You can use it to block enemy fire coming at you. You can use it to block enemies' retreat options. You can use it to split armies in half. It's really good. It's a really good ability. It basically gives you deployable terrain on demand, which is really, really nice. That's up a lot, which is great. And it has okay range. And they have enable combi rockets. This is an interesting ability. You toggle it on. It takes about 5 seconds to turn on, but I don't think your unit stops while you're turning it on. I think he's still fighting, still moving. It's not like it's a channel. It just takes a couple seconds to start. When it's toggled on, you will fire combi rockets, which are true damage and slow, and you'll fire them at a target. And I'm pretty sure that you can keep moving. You can keep walking as these rockets are fired. I don't know if you can keep meleeing. I don't know what happens if you turn this on when you melee. I think it still launches rockets, but I'm not entirely sure. It might only be when it's ranged. But the rockets are good. His DPS is quite high. The rocket DPS is 140 range damage with the true range damage with those rockets active. So they're high damage rockets. There's not very many of them. 5 rockets goes really, really fast. You can replace your rockets. They don't auto regenerate, so you will have to loot scrap to get them. But you probably won't have time to do that in the middle of the fight, and you probably don't gain a lot of DPS if you're looting scrap, because looting scrap is a channeled activity that makes you walk away from the damage. So basically this is like a one-time thing that you can get. I guess you could try to use it for chasing someone, but the Mega Knobs are too slow. So you could like rocket him once and toggle it off, then toggle it on and rocket him again. But it's probably not going to do very much, quite honestly. You're just probably getting a very short one-time damage boost in each fight. The Mega Knobs are also extremely tanky, with 6,750 heavy HP, heavy armor HP, which is a ton of HP. I've said in the past that one of the problems I have with the Mega Knobs is once they take a fight, you can never heal them up again because it just takes too long to heal. For whatever reason, healing doesn't seem to be percent based in this game. When you're near a building, it seems to just be a flat amount of healing, which means they take fucking forever to heal. But I have been told in the meantime that you get better healing from being next to your starting structure as opposed to like a normal barracks. So hypothetically, if that is true, and I haven't tested that yet, but I plan to in the very near future, I guess you could use recall ability to call him home at some point, or walk him home, or put him in a truck and bring him home, and then heal him much quicker there and actually get his health up again, because that's a ton of health. They're a really good unit. I quite like them. They're one of my favorite Orc heroes. And I actually feel like Orc has a problem with unit diversity, whereas a decent chunk of the Space Marine heroes are okay, and a really sizable number of the Eldar heroes are okay. Orc has some really good heroes and some really shit heroes, which means that a lot of times you're struggling to try any diversity of unit builds because there just aren't a lot of good ones. This is one of the good ones. Both of their special elite doctrines are decent. When the Mega Knobs are deployed, the explosion from Knobs' explosive armor heals in a circle. That's decent. You would have to, basically as Knobs are a big tank unit that force enemies to attack them, and this will make them also, as enemies are attacking them, they're healing the other guys around them, which is certainly really annoying. That's a pretty decent one. And the Mega Knobs command Better Shout. This is great. I like this ability a lot. In the early game, boys aren't real strong. In the early game, you're very, very vulnerable to Eldar. and very, very vulnerable to, like, for example, in a 3v3 setting, to getting teamed. One of the things that lets you deal with that, I like the boys getting a shield while they're channeling Shout. Maybe I overvalue it, but I like it a lot in the early game. It's a unit that I'm using every single game, and I'm always fighting with the boys in the early game, and this lets the boys be a little bit more survivable without draining quite as much requisition, and gives me some time to react. You got to be careful with grenades, because the boys channeling Shout is a channel ability, so they will stop and stay stationary, and enemies sometimes will grenade me doing that, in which case this is a lot less effective. But I like this doctrine, and this doctrine actually sounds pretty decent too. I don't like doctrines for later game heroes that have to be when the hero is deployed, but actually knobs are probably at their strongest right around the time the mega knobs are being deployed, or still actually useful during the time when the mega knobs are deployed. So there's some synergy there. So it's nice to have an elite where the doctrines actually make some sense. They apparently also have a critical strike, which I didn't notice. That's cool. They get bonus damage and bonus true damage on a critical strike. Didn't know that, but probably not all that relevant. But overall, decent unit, mostly because of electric wall, but also because of their high melee damage. Just make sure that you're using them at the appropriate damage type for what you're fighting, since their damage type changes based on melee versus ranged. Okay, so that is our run through of the mid-game orc units. Basic summary: stay away from Waze Makkah. Be aware of what it's costing you to deploy Gore Guts this late in the game, and be aware how great mega knobs are. So hopefully this was helpful. And as always, I've put the DPS up on the screen for these units. For some reason, in the codex, there's not DPS listed. And when I look over guys, there's not DPS listed. Why isn't there DPS listed when I look at this guy? Like, if I mouse over somewhere, do I find it? I couldn't find it. Like, I don't know why it's not listed in the codex, but you have it now. It's on the screen, so hopefully that's useful. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button, and check out the rest of my Dawn of War and other content if you like that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff up on the channel. So thank you for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.